Good evening and welcome to the Dusty Feet. We're live again tonight and this is the inaugural back on YouTube. So if you're seeing this later, then you're seeing the inaugural YouTube setup. If you're live now, then obviously you'd have to be watching it on YouTube because you're watching on YouTube. So tonight we're going to continue our homework series in Matthew with Tim Mackie. The Dusty Feet website is going to have the YouTube links to these pages. I'll probably end up putting these series groups as playlists on YouTube. I'm just going to have to work to bring them all down, load them all back up, do all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a lot of work to make that all happen, but we'll set it up to do that. And if you were on Twitter, you'd have known this because I said we were going to be live tonight on YouTube. Again, it's the homework series. This is episode 9 in Mackie's series, part 3 of 4 for us. I've been editing this, and so but I pre-edited these so I knew how long, unlike the last one where we had 6 parts, we didn't know how long it was going to go. This was 4, so we're part 3 of 4. And Joe, Christmas is in the house. So the technical difficulties we had last week, we have overcome, which is cool. And so Joey's in the house, and I'm excited about that. So, and as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go on the Dusty Feet. And there's Joey in the house again. I got our names up there so that people don't mistake us because they might think we're twins or something. So
that's right.
I figured so instead, just
like
to make
Arnold
sure,
and Danny DeVito or something.
Just to make sure. That's right. We're the twins. There you go. And guess who DeVito is and guess who Schwarzenegger is. Just so we know. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So tonight we're gonna do part 3 on the Love Your Enemy series. I know you're doing this at the Vine as well, so hopefully this will feed in to that and that kind of stuff. Maybe throw some good discussion that'll toss things later on as well, because this is one of those. We were talking in our men's group the other night, and I mentioned that Jude is not one of those books that get talked a lot about in church, just because it brings up other things that people ask too many questions about. The Enoch and some other things, and so there's just some other challenges to some traditional doctrinal thinking that challenges, and that's why Jude's the deal. This is one of those things where it's mentioned. It's kind of like in the 10 Commandments, and we go, well, those are the 10 Commandments, and then Sabbath, and then we just kind of ignore what Sabbath is, kind of deal. In this Love Your Enemies, it's one of those where we're going to look at it, and it's uncomfortable to talk about. As Mackie coins it, it's a kick in the teeth. And it pushes us, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start by watching the clip. So this is clip number 3. Again, if you're not watching this live, I suggest you hit pause and watch the entire, the link is in the description. Watch the entire thing. I'm big on context. And so I want you to hear everything that Mackie says, and then we'll be talking about these little isolated parts, but I don't want them to be taken, to isolate something and pull it out and the argument that you're getting the entire thing brought out. Fair? So do that. So, Joe, let's take a listen to what Mackie has to say on the third cut.
All right.
And Jesus draws a very powerful conclusion. He says, if that's what God is like, and that's the God who Jesus comes to reveal, what must the kingdom of the people of the kingdom be like? So he cites weather patterns, first of all, but in doing that, he shows that he's been raised on the poetry of the book of Psalms, which contains poems that say things like this. Yahweh is gracious. He's compassionate. He's slow to anger, and he's rich in love. What does that mean, rich in love? Yahweh is good to all. He has compassion on all that he's made. The eyes of all look to you. You give them food at the proper time. You open your hand and you satisfy the desires of every living thing. Do you see? Jesus has been reading and thinking about Psalm 145, hasn't he? And that it's so deeply shaped his view of God and the world that this is what comes out. You can look at the Bible or you can look at weather. God's generous to people who hate him and who he may not like all that much either. But he gives them rain and sunshine because that's just who God is. He's generous. This is the same generosity that we're going to see Jesus enact symbolically with these meals that he's going to throw, these public meals, and then he will invite, public offenders, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all to the meal, the worst people you could imagine in these villages and communities, and he invites them to the meal to be a part of God's kingdom, and he calls them to follow him. It's this open-handed, generous, boundary-breaking welcome and invitation and generosity. And this gives us, I think, the first clue as to what Jesus means right here. So this word gets translated as love in our English Bibles. And if you've been around Door of Hope very long, you've heard me ride this horse quite a few times, right? I think, because this is not a translation problem with our translations. This is a problem with the English language. The word love, I'm convinced, is one of the most unhelpful, unclear words in the English language, right? Because, it's so unhelpful. Because it can mean so many different things. It can mean I prefer and I like something. I love pizza, you might say. I say that all the time, actually. Right? But what I mean is I actually prefer or I like it. I love Star Wars. I love and appreciate it, and there's just something about it that makes my heart smile, right? And I also love my family and my wife and my children, and that's about affection and loyalty. Those are so different. All of those are so different from each other. And we use one word to describe all three of those things. What a useless word. Why don't we just come up with 3 different words but here we go. So this is a problem in English. Because in English, love primarily refers to a feeling, right? A feeling, an emotion that happens to you. And that's can you see that Jesus means something very different by agape? Something totally different. So do you have warm feelings towards Zacchaeus when he backhands you? Is Jesus asking you to generate warm feelings to Zacchaeus when he backhands you? So we're talking about an attitude, about a mindset, and then an action that flows from that mindset. God has chosen to perform actions of kindness and generosity towards people regardless of how they behave, regardless of whether they like him or whether he happens to like what they're doing at the moment. God has chosen to agape. He's chosen. And so in Jesus' teachings, it's not like this is so undecorous here. Let's put that down. It's not like he's asking you to somehow generate like false or like warm fuzzies for your enemy. What he's asking you to do is to choose to view them in a certain way. To choose to view them the way that God sees this person. Within God's economy, this person is beloved. They're a human being. They're made in God's image. And they might be screwed up in ways that are different than me, right? But they're a human being made in God's image. And God has come among us in the person of Jesus to choose to do an act of love on their behalf. If I'm a disciple of Jesus, I actually don't have the right or the authority to treat someone as unloved when Jesus has treated them as someone who's loved. That's the logic of this here. So that you may become children of your Father who is in heaven. This is an image-bearing human being. I actually don't have in the kingdom, I don't have the right to deny someone kindness and generosity. It's not that you like lay in bed and you're just like, I just love that person. No, it's like, I can't stand that person. But they're made in God's image. Jesus gave his life. He lived and died for that person. And so I choose to adopt an attitude. There are some actions that we do because we feel like them. I just have this thing going on inside of me for my kiddos and for my wife. And I just do stuff. And sometimes. I'm portraying myself too positively here, right? So sometimes I act on that. There are other times where it's so clearly a choice, even for these people that are so close to me. And that's exactly his point. Look at what he goes on to say. He says, listen, Verse 46, he says, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Don't tax collectors do that? I mean, Zacchaeus is really, really nice to people who he knows he gets kickback from, you know? If you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than any others? Don't pagans, and pagan is not a negative word here, it just means a non-Jewish person. Don't the non-Jewish people, they don't even have the Torah, and they are nice to each other. Don't they do that? So Jesus, he's acknowledging, he's acknowledging that humans are actually pretty decent folk. Do you see that right there? Humans are pretty decent. When we're inside of our circle, when we're inside of our tribe, when we are with those whom we like, it's actually not hard for us to choose to do acts of kindness and generosity towards people who are like us, towards people who are within our circle of family, or who are in our religious tribe, or our social niche tribe, or whatever. Jesus says we all behave pretty decently, right? But that's not the issue as a societal problem. The problem is that as we love each other within our tribes and we hate people from other tribes. And who wants to argue with Jesus on that one? It's like the great American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr said, groups of people tend to be more immoral than individuals within those groups. And you guys know exactly, somehow a behavior that I would never do as an individual, but somehow I participate in and can even find myself endorsing when it's a group of people about another group of people. You guys know what I'm talking about? And so Jesus says, look, human beings are pretty decent when we're within our circle, but we're fickle and we're selective and we're ultimately self-centered with our agape. Because you walked into this room right here this morning, and you naturally gravitated towards people, towards giving a kind welcome or a hug or a hello to the people who you know that are going to give you kickback, right? Who are going to give you agape in return. And they're probably people that you know and that you have some history with. That's just how we operate. And Jesus, he just dang it. He just uncovers what an actually self-centered process that is.
So, yeah, ultimately we are so self-centered, it's pitiful and something that we have a challenge admitting that we are, right? And it drives a lot of challenges with our thinking and our self-centeredness. I wanted to bring out a point before we bounce in this. Did you notice Tim made a point about how Jesus would have been raised with these scriptures and how they would have shaped his view of God and the world around him? Mm-hmm. I liked that, and I agree with that. I think there are people that believe that Jesus knew everything. And I'm not convinced. I'm convinced that he learned. I'm convinced that he grew. I'm convinced that the Spirit could and would guide him like it can and does us. But another thing that you get is that learning as he grew up in school, doing that, we have one story of him could be just one of the feasts, could be he's around the age where you're talking about bar mitzvah type thought processes, definitely most likely a feast scenario, and he goes up and he starts espousing some very wise thoughts about, not teaching them new, but just wise thoughts for somebody so young and understanding. But the fact that he was learned in teaching and doing that isn't like Mary get up and all of a sudden, I didn't have to teach him Hebrew. He just knew it. I didn't have to send him to school. He didn't have to do that stuff. We don't see in there indications of that. But his learning is one of those pieces. So what are some of the things that stood out in this one with you that bounced some stuff? Okay. And Joey, looks like your face locked up. So something go bad call in, Joey, just hit me back if you can hear me. I'm going to click back to here, and we'll take a look at what we're talking about with this. So we're on the homework series with Mackie. Hopefully Joe will pop back in and go because then his face froze. He locked up. There he goes. Okay, you're back. Let me assign you to guest, and then let me pull you up to here. There you go. You're back.
I don't know where we went. You froze on my screen. I
You
didn't know
froze
what
on
to do.
mine. That was weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like you were in the middle of when you were talking about Mackie and I think bringing up the Torah,
Yeah.
and boom, it died, and that was it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's your feed from where you're at because you're lagging here too. So, okay. So what did in this thing with Mackie? What hit you on some of the stuff that he said in this particular section?
Well, some of it when we're talking as the video's playing, he's talking about agape love.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things we were discussing is, during my sermon series, right now I'm discussing the same topic because I think it's a really great topic to discuss. And I said in the title of my sermon, "Can it be done?" And of course, when I announced it last week, there were people who immediately, like Erica was one of them. She said, "Yes." And then this week again, I kind of made fun of that, that people were giving away the answer ahead of time. But, when we soberly look at what it means to truly love, quote unquote, your enemy, and it's not a matter of just feelings, it's actually a sacrifice that takes place on your behalf a lot of times to show that agape love. It's one thing to say it, but it's another thing. So as he was discussing that, the agape love and how in our inner circle, it's really easy to love those in that inner circle, and how outside that circle we can be very objective to other groups or other people and yada yada. So it's a lot of stuff for your mind to kind of like think about and chew on, with this series. A lot of chewing going on with this series. So that
Yeah.
was one of the things that stood out to me.
Yeah. He because interesting because he mentions love in our cultural context, right? Is oft associated with the feeling I'm in love, right?
Right.
Or the feeling of something that makes you feel good. Either you love a back rub, or you love pizza, or you love your dog, or you love. There's good feelings attached to those things, feelings or emotions. Okay, and we'll mix that positive those kind of things. Okay, and you mentioned something about sacrificial. When we get to the agape side of the equation, now you have, and he tiered it as attitude and action. So the choice is the choice. Once you make the choice, then what's the action that comes from it? And then it goes back, and then God says, okay, if that's confusing for you, let me show you what that looks like. And then he turns around and talks about rain, sun, food. And he realizes God, we use the term blesses, okay? That's an interesting choice of word, but we'll use it for the discussion. So God blesses the just and the unjust. He's going to bless all of them. Everyone has access to sun, water, food. Now, in our cultures, we have piled people in top of certain places. We've jammed stuff up, put stuff so that then we control food, we control things, yada, 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 that kind of choice. And it's your choice on what you want to do. Convenience, blah, 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 all those kind of things that go. All boils down to choice. But God says, my planet runs for everyone. That's how much I love them. That's how much I love them. I love everything so much that one, I do all of that. And two, when Yeshua's there, Jesus is talking about, and then he eventually becomes the sacrifice for, again,
Right.
the same crowd.
And so that what you're saying too, because I thought you were about to hit a John 3:16 quote there for a second, but because when you said God so loved, and that's what John 3:16 says, he says, "For God so loved the world," and that wasn't fuzzy feelings love. That was I love the guy who's worshiping Baal over here. That's for the group that's over here at the temple of Diana. This is for everyone in this entire world, not just a select group of the. So I so love the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, and I don't think, we really got to go back and look at that because this, like I said, this isn't love like, the heart shaped love and all this stuff. This is agape love at its best because now he's about to sacrifice his son for those who are cursing and spitting on him, parting his garments, casting lots,
Yeah.
he's just another to the Roman guys for a lot of them. He's just another Jewish guy that got out of line
Yep.
and he's getting what he's getting. That's it,
Yep.
not even realizing that the Son of God is up there and he's up there for you as much as everybody else.
Yep. When he's, because he goes and he uses, when he's talking about his term, and he goes, when somebody slaps you, right, turn the other cheek. And we talked about it in the previous episodes that that's not let anybody do anything to you. It's your attitude shifts, that you realize that that behavior on their part is their choice and their behavior. What you're going to do is say, how do I choose to express what God, the best I understand how God would express. His example was turn the other cheek. And Mackie's talk was Zacchaeus goes over and he just backhands you, and he says, obviously, Zacchaeus, you're having a bad day. And you need to get it out. You want the other one? Just get it out. I get it. It's rough being a tax collector, the Roman centurion and you and your family are there, and he throws a bag and says, carry it to the top of the hill. And he said, it's hot, you're sweaty. Can I take this to your house? Can I carry this to your doorstep? Knowing you can't probably go in his house, he would never let a Jew in his house, but carry to his doorstep. Again, a difference of attitude and how we would do things. It's an attitude and then an action, which is not, and this is where we want to say, that's not fair, that's not right, that's not just. And I've said this before, every single thing that Jesus talks about, when Yeshua brings everything up, we have an example to look back on. He gives a little story that he's talking to the group. When I look back on his life, I see this playing in Technicolor. We do. But we, in our selfishness, don't want to do that. We don't. Right now, we're vilifying people inside our community, outside our community, drawing lines all over the place. Agape is not only not visible, I'll argue obscure, meaning it's hidden. And we're failing as a community with that as a whole. We are. We sometimes, on some things within our group, we can say we're doing okay, but that's what Jesus says. Everybody within their own circle can get along. You get along when you agree, but how do you take it when somebody does something counter to what you're saying, and how do you embrace them? And we're seeing it now. True? So how do we address that? How do we take choosing to be different, to break those boundaries? How do we do that? How do we do it from a community standpoint?
I will tell you, for me personally, my personal walk in this journey has always been from an outsider looking in, coming into the Torah walk and seeing some of the things that cause the strife and division, making a purpose in my own heart that we won't do that. One of the things that we've discussed multiple times is how we want to have a atmosphere at the Vine that is very safe for people to come there with difference of opinions.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's you may see Paul different. You may have a different calendar. We have people who will start their Sukkot a day before us or a day after us, and then guess what? That's okay because I'm like, just come anyway. Whether you're day in day out on the same day, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we need to focus on the weightier things
Right.
in life and the weightier things on Torah and not going off another subject. Let me bring myself back in. So for me, I've been a lot more sensitive to that in this walk as far as when things happen. For me, it's Shema. It's listening to what the Spirit is saying to me. And as I've said multiple times before, when something comes up and things were coming up early in the ministry, and I would hear that little voice say, "Okay, big boy, what are you going to do now?" Because it was a challenge to me. If I'm going to continue to do the same thing that's causing other people to split, if I'm going to continue to live my life in a certain direction, that you're going to get the same outcome every time that you're seeing in everybody else, or am I going to step back for a minute instead of reacting to something that was said to me? Step back and go, you know what? We all have a Zacchaeus. And a lot of times it's not a physical strike, but it's a verbal strike, which can actually hurt a lot worse than someone smack. Sometimes you've heard it say, "I really just smacked me across the chops," and to say
Yeah.
those words.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was when the words did come in and they cut deep, then to step back and go, okay, what am I going to do that's different? How can I handle this in a way that's going to honor my father and make this situation better instead of worse?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, focus. And sometimes we just need to step back and reflect for a moment instead of reacting. And I think in those moments we're able for me, I was able to hear what the Spirit is wanting to say to me and how to handle certain situations. So that's kind of where I'm at with the love your neighbor and learning, what it actually means the love your enemy.
Well,
You know,
and it's that, and we know that Yeshua is having this conversation, and he's saying things. You've heard it written. It's been written, or you've heard it said. Like in this particular one, to hear it said that the elementary school you're learning to share. Okay, and I didn't write. I wrote this down somewhere else. Doggone it, and I wanted to bring it up. We share when we're a kid. We're selfish. Okay. And then we eventually learn to share with our friends. Then we eventually learn to share with everybody in the class. Then we learn to share with strangers, right? And we're talking about kids playing in the playground and playing the deal, and that's great. But the mature thing isn't sharing with everybody. The mature thought is none of it's mine. Sharing isn't the point. It's not mine. So it's shared because it's not mine, not because it's mine to share. It's there because it's not mine. And as these levels start to go up, where you go from where it goes, don't murder, God says, don't even think about it. In other words, that root cause goes down to hate, goes down to fear, goes down to that primal level of, and you need to get out of that. You're not, if you don't hate, you won't murder.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Things happen accidentally. Again, not murder. Okay. It's the attitude shift, and he's carrying us further and further with this. So, like I said, we're looking at how to get along amongst ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a maturing and growing. And you'd almost say that let's argue just for fun that a church community is everybody from kindergarten to college. Okay, so you have this mix of everybody in between in the group. The group itself is not all kindergartners, and they're not all doctorates. Okay, that you have this mix in between. But in that, the perception of what you're doing, for instance, when you're a little kid, somebody takes something away from you to give to somebody else, your attitude is, you took it from me. And so now you're getting in this is mine, this is your, you can't have this is mine. And we start getting in this, putting our stakes in the ground of what's ours. We do that with property. We do that with personal rights. We do those things. And I think this love your enemy is where it takes you and says, none of it's yours. Even your love and your life. I give life to everyone. I bless everyone. So if we're in the image of God and we're going to reflect him and we're going to be his ambassadors, nay, I say priests, then we would be reflecting the wishes of our Creator, and in our position today, being post-Jesus, right, our King. And I'll argue we're not doing it. And this is that love your enemy thing. I said, and today, I was around in the 70s. I was a very young kid in the 60s. I wasn't out in LA when they had the Watts riots, but I was a kid, young kid. Heard about them, knew they happened, didn't live there, okay? But Watts is not that far away from where I lived. Huge things. Go back, look in history. For people that don't know what that is, please go look it up. So a very tumultuous time in our country. And today is reminiscent of that to a point. And we're so busy drawing lines on who's right and wrong that this love thing is, even those who do not love God are nice to each other, actually generally nice to each other, what Mackie said, those that they choose. So how are we different? Are we supposed to be different?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll bite. So how do we take people to say, and the topics of today are everything from who the president is to jabs in your arm. Okay. And we're drawing these lines and calling people evil we're saying things that are so, oh my gosh, hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
That to say, you're telling me that you're saying God said this, and I go, that's interesting, because you have other people saying God said this, it doesn't match. So either one of you is wrong, I'll argue both of you are wrong, but that's another question. But in that, our communities are doing this to each other, and skip the world as a whole in that setup. Like I said, it can be nice. The other one, I'm talking about let's talk home. Let's talk on those deals. And they're uncomfortable thoughts. And to turn around and do it is an uncomfortable conversation. It's a kick in the teeth, and people don't like it. You talked about this being, he's talking to his taught ones. The disciples don't exist yet, meaning the 12. We're way too early in the game. However, we have people that want to be at the front of the group. Okay? We joked at the Baptist church, right? The most vacant rows are in the front. The back gets filled up, goes up from the back to the front. Where when you have certain teachers, and I see them when I see Mackie's episodes, whenever I see anything and it's a crowd, it goes from the front back. You want to be up because you want to hear. You want to do. And so it's evident in Yeshua's teaching when he's doing it. He goes up the mountain, he goes up, and those that follow him are the dedicated ones, the ones that take the time, the effort to climb up the mountain and get at the feet. So that group is the group that he's focusing on, but he's setting them up for expected behavior that is going to be echoed throughout the kingdom, not just for that group, that attitude is going to echo from the kingdom, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So how do we deal with that? Yeah.
Well, I want to say this, that I think some of the issues we run into, I say it is an issue. It's not, that we run into. There's my mic jumping again. Let me turn that down. We'll figure that out. But anyway, I think one of the things that happens is we get so caught up in my point of view is right. Let's bring it back into why do we have conflicts with the jab? Why do we have conflicts? No jab, jab.
Yeah.
Biden's my president. He's not my president. We have all these.
Yeah.
I'm on all these social media sites, and a lot of times what it is my point of view is so important to me that I'm going to drive it, whether it's on one side or the other, because I see it from both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people who are very venomous about getting jabbed and those who are very venomous about not getting jabbed. And so there's an agenda from both sides is being pushed to the point that, and it's the same thing within the church body, is I'm correct on my theological thinking of something and you are not, and I'm going to push this to the point that you're going to see it the way that I see it and you're going to understand it the way that I understand it.
Yeah.
And so then we have this thing where they both come in like this and neither one's giving.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're really supposed to do is hey Bob, this is where you are, your understanding of something, this is where Joe is, and you may have said it on here before, but there's things that me and you don't agree on.
Oh, yeah.
But the one beautiful thing about our relationship is we have never allowed that to come in between our friendship.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you start seeing, when you say truly loving your brother, and it's not that we're so far, we're not like polar opposites on everything.
Right.
But there are some things that
Mhm.
we're going to see different, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, me and you could still, if you lived in town, we could still go down the road and get a coffee together.
Yeah.
And we could still talk about whatever, and we can geek out over microphones and everything else, and
Yeah.
our technical stuff. And I think that's something that we've witnessed in front of the brothers at the Vine a lot. That hey, you've even said, me and Joe, there's things we don't agree on, but at the end of the day, we're not at each other's neck. We're not, you're dumb, you're an idiot, you're not. We're not any of those things. At the end of the day, what I'm proud of is the fact that you're my brother, one of my best friends, and I'm getting emotional on your show. And you're one of the guys I call that, when I do get heated, about something that I didn't call Bob. I need to call him. He's got to talk me down, man. But those are signs, I believe, of healthy, mature relationships that we can get past. Just like we talk about Brother Judah. If people would see them mid-rash, they think that those guys hate each other. Those guys are about to throw down. And at the very end, hey, you want to get some coffee, whatever. And they're off and they're getting coffee together and they're laughing about life and different things after their mid-rash. Where on our side, our mid-rashes can turn in, not with the Vine, because I think we do a great job with that. But I've heard of and I've seen where people get real ugly online with each other, and people just, my point of view, and God said this, and that's something I try to be very careful of, is because so many different people will say, well, God told me, but there's 10 different views or 10 different things, and it's like going, So anyway, I don't mean to get off on that tangent.
No. Your point is no, it's an important one and a strong one. Is that you can't. I'm going to propose. I'm going to throw it out there. Mm-hmm. You cannot agape if you cannot even exercise brotherly love in the community. In other words, you can't go there. So to say, can we do it? I'd say no. I'd say, should we do it? Do we want to do it? The answer is yes. Can we do it? The ability's there. Do we choose to do it? And I'd say more often than not, no. We're thinking differently, but I'm saying the honest root cause choose is we're not. And we do that because even inside our community, we argue about those things. You have those. I have the opportunity to be in Clubhouse. I got invited before it went public, but there still is this house church group, and they talk about different things. And one of the things, early topics, was God and politics, in the sense that there were people that are God followers, that want to engage, love God, and love their brother that were, at this point, Republican and Democrat. And of course, the root deal, either side is saying, oh my gosh, how can you do that? And the people want to go. The people that went to the room wanted to listen and find out. And we found out all kinds of very cool things in engaging in that and saying, I can love you. And now here's the hard part. Because we put caveats that still are selfish. I can love you in spite of the fact that you're wrong. Okay?
Right.
Okay? So
Right.
and I think that's a load of hooey. Okay? As my dad would say. Okay? That's a load of hooey. Okay? And you go, no, I love you even when we're having trouble agreeing. Okay? And in that, can I let you, because this is the point that we want to do, we're in this church mentality of I have to convince you that this is right, instead of I'm going to give you the same grace God does and let you choose. However, let me, it's funny, we hear Paul and Peter talk about this often, let me not be your stumbling block. Let you be able to watch me and not be. And so when you're driving down the street and you say you're different and you're a God guy and that kind of stuff, and I see you speeding through traffic, cutting through lights, so you're not respecting authority, you're not respecting laws, and then you turn right around and talk about Torah, and and then you talk against the leadership that is in the country that you're in, and you talk about obedience, and you talk about stuff, that's hypocrite. And so then people, why should they listen to you? And why do we do this? We become our own worst enemy trying to do agape, where we want to try it. And I go, we need to live it first and then express it. In other words, the attitude, and then what is our action going to be? What's our attitude going to be? And what action is coming in? And it's the choice to look at somebody differently. I thought it was interesting in the beginning with the previous president, and we had people saying they were going to move to Canada, and because he's not my president, I'm going to move to Canada. And
Right.
everybody on this side said, go move to Canada, blah, 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 because he's your president. Then we have the flip. And then we have people that all of a sudden say, he shouldn't be the president. He's going to be ousted. He shouldn't, da, 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 da. And I'm going, oh my gosh, can we get more hypocritical? And then you have a choice. Leave. Leave. At least you have a choice.
Yeah.
Back, I'd say, where are the Jews going to go? Now, there were people that left, that they would go to another Jewish community somewhere because they couldn't take it long enough. People in Rome, that's where they were the farmers, the fields. It was their job. It was their livelihood. It's what they did, and they were tied to the land. So they took occupation to be in the land. It's a choice. And then how do you live that? And Yeshua lived it, and he showed it. He heals. I mean, we have the story of the centurion. Please go look back it up, people. Go read the story, because it's going to shake your world on what you think a believer is. Okay? And how God reacts to it. I mean, really look deep at it. Really look deep at it and realize who he's talking to and what his words to the crowd around. Not just what he does for him, the words to the crowd around. Because them be us. And I keep saying this point, we are them, they are us. Those people in the Bible are stories, but plug yourself in. Yeah?
And if I'm not mistaken, there's somebody again. Was that the one that where he said, "No greater faith have I seen"?
And
That's
this is a Roman
guy.
centurion. Now, he had witnessed enough of people and probably Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say definitely Yeshua. I won't say probably. I'll say probably people around. Definitely Yeshua. That he believed and said, I'm not raised in Torah. I don't even understand that. But
But
I do know that your actions show me agape love.
yeah, and there was something about Yeshua that that he recognized. If I'm, and I hadn't read his story in a little while, but because he says, "I too am a man of authority, and I understand if I, and he goes through this whole thing. So there was something about he may not have understood Torah, but but in his understanding, God was connecting with him.
As best as he could and as best as
Yeah,
he understood. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And so we get another example of agape. Like I said, he mentions it here early in Matthew, early in the game. We're only in chapter 5, right? And this is 5, 6, and 7. And the Matthew series, for people, again, reminding us, we are in the Matthew series. We're in chapter 5. We got to go to the end, okay? So this is going to be interesting as we get through all of this. But right now, in this point, we're very early in his ministry. And that's why I say, we're the luxury of looking back, right? We're the luxury of seeing it differently because we're getting a hindsight story. It's not being lived out that way, right? And then we go, well, what? Figuring out who he is, struggling with what I think I understand. Today, I'd say maybe we are doing the same. We're trying to figure out who he is, struggling with what we understand, and then realize that he didn't. I said it last night at men's group, and I said it last week on the stream that I was taking back something that I had said for years, that there was nothing new in the New Testament, and I am taking it all back. Okay.
yeah. I thought that was pretty cool when you said that.
Yeah, because and I'm not only am I going to take it back, but you know what it's going to do? It's going to force me to then look at some things and see things to say, is that really new? Or do I need to accept it because it's new, not because if I can't find it there, then it's not here. Okay, that kind of thing. And that's important, and it's another step in hopefully me growing in looking at Scripture and trying to understand this as you grow in this. And it goes with this again. We'll loop back around, like I talk about Ryan. You say we just cycle back around. We keep cycling on these things. We're going to keep going through things as we learn the lesson, and we think we learn a lesson, or we try to get to a lesson, and then, like you're saying, the fifth cycle through Torah, and you're looking at it going, "Oh my gosh, look at what I just saw," or now I'm seeing it differently. Dorothy Wilson, who we've had on the show before, I would love to have her back. We've been with her when she's been to Torah for 20 years, and then this comes up, and she blurts out she had never seen this before.
Yeah.
20 years you're looking at something.
20 plus years.
Yeah. And you get people that go, I don't need to read the Bible because I already read it once. And I go, I'm sorry. May I be a better example of not doing that? Meaning of doing it by not, right? By not, right? And what that looks like. And the best we can be is that example. And that's what Jesus said, first I say it, then I do it. So to turn back and look and watch and do that, loving your enemy.
Yeah, man. That's why.
What's the ultimate love your enemy statement that he gives? He literally does it on the last day he's alive. Father, forgive them.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do.
They don't know what they're doing.
Yep.
Forgive them. They don't get it. We would be marching with signs, doing something, spamming Facebook and whatever else you're going to do, tweeting, telegramming, something, going, oh my gosh, I've been so wronged. I've been so deal. It's just, they don't understand. They just don't get it. And you know what? You know what hurts even more? That kick in the teeth. It's when Jesus looks at us and he's our intercessor to God. And he turns and says, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing.
Yep.
They don't know it. They don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. And we think it's about the Roman centurion. And it's us.
Yep.
We're not the enemy. We were talking about this last night. You mentioned that, to say the enemy, we know is the adversary. Okay. Right. So that's cool. What Yeshua is addressing is you've created enemies and you think they're enemies. God says they're mine. There's a difference. There's a difference. You've created an enemy and he says they're mine. I'll handle all the other stuff. God says justice is mine. Yeah. Yeah. Yahweh shows favor and is compassionate, patient, great in loving commitment. Yahweh is good to all, and he has compassion on all his works. The eyes of all look to you expectantly, and you are giving them their food in its season, opening your hand and satisfying the desire of all that live. That's from Psalms 145. These are kingdom principles. This is where we're going. And if we have a problem with it now, the correction's coming. We think at times that God's going to correct the world and the world's going to set the world right. And I said, I think you're not realizing the correction that we're going to get for ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we got to start loving our brother first, like you were talking about on your last week at the Vine.
Yep.
You have to start in the beginning. You can't do agape till you start loving your brother, and we have to start there. I get it.
Yep.
And one would even argue more. In another way, you have to understand loving yourself. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother Pandora's box to open.
Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah, and maybe we should consider that sometime to have another side talk about that kind of stuff. But if we can get to there, then we can get to I said, God expects it, so I'd say we're capable of it, loving your enemy, because he talks about it. Because it's going to be an expectation in the kingdom from the king. I'm one of those where the words that I'll choose to use are, I don't think we can until we get to somewhere else. And so my argument to that would be, and I love Erica to pieces, but the answer is no. We can't. We can't. But
I was gonna say, but a good start is, and that's why I had to back it up a little bit on Shabbat, was we will never understand what it means to love our enemy, quote unquote enemy,
right,
until we can love each other unconditionally.
Right.
Because if you can't start there, then the other parts
you'll never get there.
Happen.
Yeah,
you're never going to get there.
You will never get there, and it's going to take a while to get there. One of the clubhouse ones, again, they're talking about in this church group was racial reconciliation, and I've been involved in that conversation. We're talking about it, and I said, and I brought up as one of the points of the conversation was, I don't want to get too off the diatribe because we're out of time, but on the point of that's hypocritical. You're talking about trying to reconcile something when the church can't reconcile itself. We have all the denominations, all the kind of stuff, all it is going to, we can't reconcile ourselves as a body. How hypocritical to think that the church can address racial reconciliation. We can't reconcile ourselves. So it's the same ilk that we're talking about here.
Yep.
It's cut from the same cloth that we need to reconcile. We're being hypocrites. And that's who Yeshua had the single largest bone of contention was the hypocrisy.
Yep.
It wasn't what they said. It wasn't even doing. It was the hypocrisy that went with it. And I think it's our hypocritical behavior that does the most detriment to the kingdom as a whole.
Yep. The one thing that Yeshua said about that at that time that really always sticks with me is he says they sit on the seat of Moses teaching you, and so do as they are saying, but definitely do not do as they're doing, because they were not walking out they were reading the Torah scroll every week on Shabbat.
Yeah.
They may be giving a little bit of lesson there with it. He says that's great. Listen to what they're saying, but don't do what they're doing.
Or meaning their lives. They
Right,
might
their
even have
lives,
told you
right.
what to do. And you'd
Right,
say, that's a good
exactly.
thing to do. But then they don't do it themselves.
Right.
And how they're treating widows, poor, orphans, all those things that, again,
Well,
we're going to get to and talk about Matthew and all those things. We're going to get there.
that's for a discussion for another time, but
Right.
definitely I call it the system in Jerusalem and that whole region was broken. It was very corrupt. It was very broken.
Yeah.
The weight that was placed upon someone, the yoke that was placed upon the people living at that time was incredible by its own people, on top of being controlled by the Romans. And so there was a great oppression going on with the people from both sides. And anyway, so
No,
that's
and
for another time.
and I'm not unconvinced that we're not as broken on another sense.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
probably more broken
yeah,
now.
yeah,
than it's
on
ever
that
been.
piece. But you've got a good point, Joey. That it is.
I was listening to a guy. I'll make this real short. I was listening to a guy yesterday. I kind of laughed because he was, and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to give traffic that direction on YouTube. But he was basically telling everyone to not listen to a particular preacher any longer. And he had some good points that he was bringing out that this guy was teaching from the pulpit. But at the same time, I can tell that his theology that he believes in, that he is 100% on board what he believes in, and what the other guy was saying was completely wrong. And then he looks at the camera with the most sincere look on his face and says, unless you believe in Trinity, you are absolutely not saved. And I went, whoa. I was like, so you're cutting on this guy for his theology, but then you come out with a very bold statement that's nowhere in the scripture whatsoever, that unless you believe in Trinity, that he said unequivocally, you are not saved unless you believe in Trinity. I was like, oh, wow. And again, you're seeing supposed to be two brothers, so to speak, and just, the one tearing the other one apart.
Yep.
And because I'm going to drive what I believe now to be correct theology or beliefs, and I'm just looking at him going, wow, that just made me like,
Yeah, and when I go back and I say, there's a Roman centurion. So this will good as we segue and get ready for part 4. This was good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joey.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it.
Cool, and we'll talk. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
So our updates, things will be on the Dusty Feet. This feed will be on the Dusty Feet because I always post the previous week's episode and get ready for the links in the new one, especially with YouTube links. YouTube links will be there. It'll be cool. We'll have some fun there. And the updates, get on Twitter so you can do that. Since I started the website YouTube up again, I'm gonna need my subscriber base back so we can do that. That's kind of a duh factor, right? So that'll be handy. Next week, homework series again, part 4. We're going to wrap up this section, episode 9. We'll play the last clip from that and talk about part 4. That'll be fun. because I want to wrap this up and get on, because we've got a lot to talk about in Matthew, and we're in chapter 5. We're at the end of chapter 5, right? So we kind of have to have ourselves ready. And I know we're a little behind, but I do enjoy our poems. I'm enjoying this. So here's our poem. Spin Cycle by Skip Moen. Broken Bits, Poems from the Wasteland. Is there a secret? I asked. No secret, a flat-toned reply. Just what happens. God weaves the cloth from our own misshapen choices. You decide how many rags to leave from which He embroiders. A tapestry of glory. Needlepoint lives. A puncture wound where every thread is drawn through the canvas. Each painful opening a knot of the divine spiderweb, connecting us all on its invisible strands of shimmering crystal. And thanks for being with us tonight on The Dusty Feet.